It's a perfectly honorable profession, being a news presenter. But let's not demean this great profession of journalism by calling these idiots, journalists.
Welcome back to Hardball. That was Walter Cronkite advocating for the British term presenter. In other words, don't use anchor person when the person doesn't know the news business. I interviewed him in 1996 when my show was called Politics with Chris Matthews and aired on CNBC. Praise for Cronkite poured in, of course, after the news of his death on Friday night. And today we learned his memorial service will be held this Thursday. Joining me now is Dan Rather, who succeeded Cronkite as anchor of the CBS Evening News and is now host of HDNet's Dan Rather Reports. Dan, it's great to have you on. I couldn't think of a better person. What do you think of him knocking the airheads that sometimes masquerade as news people?
Well, that was classic Walter Cronkite. I want to emphasize his point was that there's so many people trying to play a reporter on TV. The very essence of Walter Cronkite was he didn't just play a reporter on television, he was a reporter, had been a reporter for a very long time. And I think his point was that so many people now are presenters and should be called presenters. I don't like the chances of that happening.
Not good. Anyway, let's take a look at Walter Cronkite on the issue of politics. Here he was in a 1996 interview, which would be 13 years ago for all of us. Here it is. Four brothers, but my older brother's a bit more conservative than me, a bit. And he once said, when the big controversy about you in the old days from the conservatives who didn't like your broadcast, he said, I'm a conservative, and Cronkite's a liberal, but he does the best broadcast on television, the best news, and I'm going to watch him every night. What's your reaction to that?
Richard Nixon called me the best of a bad lot. I don't know whether that was good or bad. I don't know. I was very much offended that I didn't get on Nixon's hate list. But I don't know. I suppose, in all honesty, I'm a liberal.
Right.
I think so. But I would like to define liberal. I think the great problem with this label is that it has been seriously misused for political purposes.
Dan, what do you make of that little conversation? That's hidden in the eaves all these years, but there he was saying, I'm a liberal.
Well, that was, again, classic Walter. Keep in mind that he wanted to redefine liberal as it's used in today's political context. He meant that he was liberal in the sense that he was in favor of preserving those things worth preserving, but changing those things that needed changing. Look, after he left the anchor chair, Walter was much more inclined to talk in those terms. I think it's important to remember, particularly for those who were not of memory age or not alive when Walter was in his prime, that he was a guy who was a straight news reporter. Walter's instructions to us in the field were always, tell it straight without fear or favoritism, pull no punches, say it like it is, insofar as it's humanly possible, keep your own prejudices and biases and feelings and emotions out of it. To a very large degree, he did that. Yes, there were some exceptions. The time he spoke about the Vietnam War just after the Tet Offensive being the best known example. But Walter was, what he stood for, the beacon he sent out was straight news reporting. Whatever your political persuasions are, however anybody wants to label you, get to the story, tell the story as straight as you can, and the American public will understand. At the same time, you have to understand that politicians of various persuasions will be taking their shots at you.
Yeah, we're looking at these file footage pictures of him interviewing Ike on the bluffs of Normandy back in 1964. That was one of my favorite interviews ever, watching those two guys go at it, because he covered, of course, the Second World War. Here's Cronkite on world leaders he's covered. I want your reviews of these, Dan, as well. Right. He did this back in 96, again, 13 years ago, looking at the presidents he's covered and giving a sort of sense of their caliber when he met and worked with them. Here he is. Who of all the men you covered, Ike, Harry Truman before him, Jack Kennedy, Nixon, Johnson, Jimmy Carter, Reagan, who, when you were with them like this, 3 feet away from them, did you really feel the majesty of their superior mind and leadership ability? Sort of order them in terms of the guys who felt like president when you were with them.
Well, if that's the criterion,
I'm just asking you that one criterion.
I think I would have to say probably Eisenhower. He had that kind of dignity about him. you felt the strength of Johnson very strong, that he could crush or elevate at will, practically. You felt tremendous power there. Respect for general intelligence. I like Carter.
What you make of that? I love it when you guys do this, because you do get those one-on-ones with these guys. You get close in and personal.
Well, first of all, partly because they shared the memories of World War II. That Cronkite had tremendous admiration for President Dwight D. Eisenhower, who, after all, had been commander of all Allied forces in the European theater. And keep in mind, this is the Walter Cronkite who said openly after he left the anchor chair that he was a Stevensonian Democrat. But Walter believed that when it comes to the presidency, character is most important, and he admired Eisenhower for his leadership skill, for his character. I'd heard him say myself several times that he thought Jimmy Carter, if you gave the SAT test or an IQ test, that Carter might well score the highest of any president that he had known. But I think it's very important to note here, Chris, that Walter Cronkite dominated television news. He helped invent television news as we know it to a very large degree. That he was of that generation of Americans who always pulled for the president, whoever the president was. And he was always honored to sit with any president. He felt that it was a privilege to talk with a president or interview a president. He always found himself pulling for a president. A lot of that changed in the 60s when, as a people, as a society, we began to question more and question more carefully. But Walter Cronkite, he never walked in the White House gates a single day that he wasn't proud to be there and feel it was important in his role as a journalist in our system of freedom and democracy.
Love to hear you say that, Dan. So well said. Thank you, sir, for coming here tonight on this big night for us.
Always good to be with you, Chris.
And of course, in this reflective time on the career and really the contribution to our country of Walter Cronkite.